Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Abraham, the president of 17th Forward, North Carolina. In this video today, I want to talk about our interpretive statement, which details specifically what we as an organization are trying to do with our current bill that's in the state legislature, which will prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude in all its forms. On the North Carolina State Legislature's website, if you look up North Carolina House Bill 822, it was introduced by my constituent, whose name is Representative Alan Buwansi. There has been a couple of changes to that amendment, some of it which is pretty controversial. However, we do plan on reintroducing the bill with a more clean language. So when you look at the following text in quotation marks and italicized here, this is the ideal version of the bill that we hope is going to be on the ballot once it passes through the legislature. And again, this will be reintroduced next year in 2025 with cleaner language and any other ambiguous statements taken out. We wanted to have this video today just to kind of teach everybody what is it specifically we mean when we're trying to get rid of slavery and involuntary servitude. In many contexts, slavery has been used in other interchangeable terms throughout different civilizations, historical times, even geography can dictate what slavery is. So for example, the slavery that was practiced in colonial Britain was different than the slavery practiced in colonial Spain and Latin America and so forth. However, they all have a big overlapping concept, which is very immoral, and current research proves that it is not a sustainable way to run a civilization and also to treat human beings. So we want, as an organization, to show you guys what we specifically mean with our interpretive statement. So this interpretive statement is going to be broken down into 4 parts. Each part, as you'll see here, has its own unique section, but I want to go piece by piece to kind of explain briefly what is it we mean when we say, for example, the abstract, or the history and significance of this amendment, or what about prohibiting prison labor? Are prison labor programs going to be violated? What about judicial rulings? We're all going to get to that and answer those questions. The first part I want to start out with, though, is the abstract. So, as you can see there, this constitutional amendment will prohibit specifically slavery and involuntary servitude in North Carolina. It clarifies that involuntary servitude is slavery, just slavery by another name, as defined by Black's Law Dictionary, and involuntary servitude is also defined by using physical and emotional threats, violence, intimidating legal coercion, and other of its derivatives as found in Article 10A, Section 14 through 43.10 in the state's general statutes. So as you can see, we have a clear definition of what we define involuntary servitude within our state of North Carolina. And you can also see that there's numbers right down here. These are just kind of bullet points in terms of what this bill will specifically do. The first thing is obviously it's going to strike out that exceptions clause you see up here, where involuntary servitude is still allowed as a punishment for a crime where the party has been duly convicted in the state of North Carolina in any court of law. The second bullet point regards the amendment. So who is this going to impact mostly? This is going to impact everybody in the state, not just those who have been convicted of a crime. This amendment is going to reinsure and reinstate that all 11 million North Carolinians, irrespective of their status, that means residing civilly, having been in custody, duly convicted, incarcerated, on parole, reintegrating back civilly post-sentencing, or having been reintegrated back post-sentencing, everybody within the state, except irrespective of their status, is going to be impacted by this constitutional amendment, which will further protect the citizens and the people of North Carolina from the dangers of slavery and involuntary servitude. The third bullet point we have is this constitutional amendment is also going to remove any punishments to which the exceptions clause is applied to. Specifically, in the North Carolina Department of Corrections, a lot of punishments can stem for failure for those who are subject to involuntary servitude to not comply with it. That can include 45 days of disciplinary segregation, which is also known as solitary confinement. You can get 30 days of credit time lost for every day you refuse to work because you're not able to or you're being forced to. You get 40 additional hours of work. You can get demoted, meaning you can go to a higher security level prison. You can even lose your privileges, and you can even get your savings taken out of your account. And these punishments are all completely 100% legal, and they're still in effect to this day in the North Carolina Department of Corrections for those who refuse to comply with involuntary servitude or slavery. So now that that's out of the way, we want to go to the history and significance. We really didn't touch on this a lot, but it's very important for the history of people to know in our state. North Carolina, for the longest time, had a legacy of slavery and involuntary servitude. We were founded as a slave state ever since the colonial times and even after the United States got independence. When North Carolina was part of the original 13 colonies, it cherished profiting off of the backs of people through forced labor and slavery. It wasn't until obviously 1865 that the Civil War prohibited slavery and involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime. Now, North Carolina had its own amendment to slavery and involuntary servitude. The earliest one dates in 1868. So as you can see right there in that section, the state previously allowed for both slavery and involuntary servitude as a punishment for crime. However, in 1971, North Carolina came up with a new constitution completely drafted from scratch, which is the current constitution that's actually used to this day. So it mentions slavery and involuntary servitude are forever prohibited, except that involuntary servitude is allowed as a punishment for a crime. So basically, it prohibited slavery right there, but it still allows involuntary servitude as criminal punishment. And the current proposed amendment to what we want to do with North Carolina House Bill 822 is to abolish both slavery and involuntary servitude with no exceptions, because, as stated previously, involuntary servitude is still slavery. It's just the economic application of slavery. What we want to do in our state is make it completely clear that the stains that make up our bad history with slavery and involuntary servitude need to be changed for the better. There needs to be an amendment that marks a pivotal step in the state moving forward in terms of tolerating these institutions, which should never be the case. And to date, it has still existed in both other states, the U.S. federal constitution, and in our state, as a punishment for crime for more than 235 years, because the state was established on the 21st of November, 1789. We also want to make sure this amendment upholds human dignity and aligns our framework consistent with the modern principles of human rights, obviously individual liberty and reformative justice, instead of a more punitive, vengeance, emotional-based justice system. The third point we want to ask is, we get this actually a lot from our opposition who still want to keep slavery and involuntary servitude as criminal punishment. People are obviously concerned that this constitutional amendment is going to somehow destroy or completely evaporate all prison work programs throughout the state. This is absolutely not the case. Our organization at all does not committed to abolishing any work programs in prison. What we are against is prohibiting forced labor or involuntary servitude with punishments for noncompliance. So, while the amendment forbids any form of forced labor and its punishments for noncompliance, it does not preclude voluntary work initiatives, especially those designed for restoration and skill development, agree with the mottos of the North Carolina Department of Corrections, to be focusing on rehabilitation, protection, innovation, accountability, and professionalism. We obviously understand the value of work, how work can be a very good thing to people. We want work to be a human right, something that can never be taken away from someone. However, when you force things on people, it is not ethical at all in terms of their restorative justice or their rehabilitative processes while they're incarcerated. So all we're trying to do is get rid of that forced aspect in their punishments. We are not at all advocating for the abolition of prison labor. Obviously, to ensure compliance with this amendment, we want to make sure there is some type of oversight within the prisons and jails. There's no need to have a law if it's never going to be enforced. So we do want this to be enforced, and whenever a violation does occur, making sure that it is done in a systematic and restorative and obviously non-punitive way, and to make sure that every place in North Carolina, even the prisons and jails, are free from any remnants of slavery and involuntary servitude. You still want to make sure that the labor practices in prison are obviously all voluntary. They can be incentivized. They can adhere to the highest standards of professionalism, fairness, opportunities, and skill developments for employment both with the North Carolina Department of Corrections and obviously in other companies after people have served their sentences. So basically, this amendment again will serve as a firm commitment to the principles of what the state was founded upon, which would be individual liberty, respect for dignity amongst others, and basic human rights. We do want to differentiate the coercive practices, which would be prohibited obviously under the amendment, but also differentiate what is considered constructive voluntary labor via the State Department of Corrections. That's not at all going to be impacted by the amendment. So when we have an opposition that says, what is it going to do to prison labor work programs? Our answer is absolutely nothing. They're going to stay the same for all that matters for us. Any changes to the prison labor system are going to be dealt with other organizations independent of us, and they'll have the opportunities to negotiate that with either the state legislature or the state courts. All we're trying to do is very constitutional, it's very specific, it's very narrow, and we want to make sure that we are a state that does not tolerate any slavery or involuntary servitude for any person. Again, to conclude, it will reinforce the state's dedication to restorative justice, rehabilitation, and the protection of all people from exploitation, physical violence, and coercion, which is what the state defines as components and characteristics of involuntary servitude. Our last point we want to talk about is what is this going to be with judicial rulings? So, North Carolina, any type of suit that comes about, this will certainly be going to the courts. We want to make sure that any court, if it ever comes to a case where people, after this amendment has been successfully ratified, and it's part of the Constitution, if there are still incidences of slavery and involuntary servitude, people have a right to appeal to courts, and any North Carolina court will have the ability to take this interpretive statement, which we will be tackling alongside our bill. They can use this interpretive statement and make specific judicial rulings based off of that. So in other words, this whole document here, this 2-page interpretive statement, is a green light or permissible for any North Carolina court to use when making judicial decisions based on the absolute prohibition of both slavery and involuntary servitude in our state, including as a punishment for a crime, or the party shall have been duly convicted. That's our interpretive statement. If you guys have any questions, you are more than welcome to reach out to us. You can go to our website, 17fnc.com. You can also email us at 17th/northcarolina@gmail.com. Myself or Tate, the Vice President, will be more than happy to reach out to you. So we thank you for your time and watching this video, listening to our interpretive statement, and we'll look forward to speaking soon. Take care.